Welcome to the Friday, March 22nd, 2019 edition of the Clemson Dubcast. I'm sure everybody has March Madness fever out there after yesterday's and last night's games. No football practice this week. Tigers are on spring break like the rest of the university. Fun times over in Spartanburg earlier this week at the Freight Yard. Boy, first time I've been over there was there for the Spartanburg Clemson Club gathering. Was selling some books, visiting with Taj Boyd as well. A lot of fun people, and what a spectacular place for live music at the Freight Yard and all that. Looking forward to getting back over there. Also excited about a quick programming note. I was talking with Gary Cohen, the general manager over at the Abernathy Boutique Hotel in Clemson. We're going to start periodically recording our podcasts over at the Abernathy, maybe sometimes in the lobby area, the bar area. So we'll be able to let you guys know the times we're recording, and you can come over there and visit, grab a cold one, hang out, say hello to the guests, and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that. Abernathy, really cool place to be on whether it's a weeknight or weekend, unwind over there at the Taps Bar and Cafe. Got some really good beers on tap. So stay tuned for more info on the on-site recordings of the Clemson Dubcast. The title sponsor of the Clemson Dubcast is Parham Smith and Archenhold Law Firm in Greenville. Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold, both Clemson grads, huge fans. They are also responsible for those Clemson Dubcast koozies you might have seen floating around. I actually handed out plenty of those a few days ago in Spartanburg over at the Freight Yard. Really appreciate them doing that. Also, the forte of their firm is medical negligence. They represent patients and their family members in medical negligence actions. Also handle all sorts of other complex personal injury litigation. For instance, they handled the Cleveland Park rollover case. Also handled the GHS infection cases. Very complex stuff that they're highly trained to do. And they're in the business to help people. They offer free consultations at Parham Smith and Archenhold. So give them a call, 864-990-4581. Business owners in the upstate and beyond, I want to tell you about Tandem Payment. Based right here in the upstate, changing the face of payment processing. Offices located throughout the southeast. One of the owners of the Greenville location, 2005 Clemson grad. If you're a business owner, you know how painful it is to get the weekly phone calls from the national processing companies promising, quote, the lowest rates in the industry. Tandem approaches this part of it completely differently, face-to-face. The newest program they offer is called Cash Discount. You can eliminate up to 100% of your annual credit card processing fees. The best part of it is it encourages more cash transactions inside your business. Plus, you save the typical processing fees you pay annually. Call Tandem today to learn more about how to eliminate your credit card processing fees. 864-672-1570. That's 1570 or tandempayment.com. Okay, this week's guest, Mike Farrell, longtime recruiting analyst and director for Rivals.com. Chris Ard actually suggested this one, said he'd be a great interview, and Chris was dead on the money. Boy, Mike gets it from all angles because he doesn't really have a home site per se. A lot of vitriol thrown his way by an innumerable number of fans who don't like this take or that take. In most cases, at least in the eyes of fans, he can't win. So anyway, this is a fun conversation. Hope y'all enjoy. Okay, joined by Mike Farrell, the Director of National Recruiting, a.k.a. Godfather of Recruiting. Am I getting this right, Mike?
You're getting it right. That's what they love to call me.
The Godfather. How'd you get that name?
Chris Childers. Chris Childers, who he's on Sirius Radio.
Uh-huh.
He used to work for Rivals when we were a small company out of Brentwood, Tennessee back in the day. And he just started calling me that. I would go down there every couple of weeks to shoot some video and do some stuff. He started calling me that, and it caught on. So now everybody thinks I gave that name to myself, and I'm the most arrogant person in the world.
So you've been doing it for 20 years? Is that
22, 23, something like that. Late 90s.
okay? And when did you join up with Rivals? Was that the whole time with Rivals?
Yeah. Well, I started for an independent magazine called Eagle Action, covering Boston College. So that was before Rivals existed. Rivals came to us as a magazine, wanted to put us on the internet, which was, all new and exciting back then. And that was the first version of Rivals.com that went out of business. And then obviously it was revived under a subscription model, and the rest is history. But that was, I think I started like 95, but for Rivals, I think it was 97.
And what were you doing before that?
I'm in Connecticut, so I was working at an insurance company. But I was always doing writing on the side. I was actually did some hockey, scouting and writing before I got into football. But I learned very quickly that the money it's in the football, not in the hockey. So being up here in New England, hockey's big, but not the rest of the country. Up here in New England, football is now big with the Patriots, but it wasn't back then. But I started covering some of the local teams, Boston College, UConn, Syracuse, Rutgers, recruiting, sort of as a side gig to the insurance thing. And then it just sort of blossomed from there. I mean, the best move I ever made was I reached out to some people at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, and just said, hey, you guys are missing out on this recruiting thing. This was in the early 2000s. You're not covering it on television. It's crazy. You should be. And Dave Revson, who's now with the Big Ten Network, was the only person, well, not the only person, but he was the first person to respond. Went to lunch with him, and 2 days later, I was on ESPN talking about recruiting, and that's kind of where it all took off.
So you recognized in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s that recruiting coverage was sort of what people were just ignoring it, and newspapers included. What were your thoughts on it then? I mean, were you just like, what are these people doing? Why are they I guess ignoring it?
Yeah. I started to follow it, when there were magazines, Blue Chip. I think it was called Blue Chip Illustrated and all that other stuff. And I was always fascinated as a fan as to who was next, who was going to be the next big prospect. And it wasn't just for football. It was basketball. The Big East was obviously huge when I was growing up. Hockey, just who was going to be that next guy. But to find out before anybody else found out and where he was going to school. So that's kind of where I got interested in recruiting. And recruiting wasn't that big back then, in the late 90s. It was a lot of 900 numbers. If you remember those days, people would call in and they get charged like, I don't know, $3 for the first minute and, $2 every minute after that for recruiting information. And that's how you made money other than selling magazines. And then the internet came along and people started selling the information on there. And it really started to blossom, I would say, right around the time I hit ESPN. But they had Tom Lemming on there. Everybody has heard of Tom Lemming. He was one of the first guys to ever do recruiting on a national level. But they just weren't doing anything with him, or they weren't doing live commitments or any of the stuff that I thought people would be really interested in. So I decided to see what we could come up with, and they were very, very encouraged by it. We had Tim Tebow announce his decision on the air, Percy Harvin, a bunch of big name guys back in the day that really sort of gauge the interest of the average fan. Like, who is this Tim Tebow guy? People before Rivals, they wouldn't have known. So that's kind of where it took off. But ESPN wasn't doing anything with it at the time.
Do you think it's basically it's hope. Like people always are looking to the next thing, like you said, that hope is sort of the genesis of that.
Hope and, kind of pride in your university. If you're a big, Georgia fan or a big Clemson fan or Florida fan or whatever, you want to know, who's going to be the next superstar for your football team, who's coming to save the day, or who's going to be that Trevor Lawrence, that Deshaun Watson, that type of guy. Are we getting that type of talent to put it all together, and not just to win national championships, because, obviously only one team gets to do that every year, but to, compete in our conference, to win 8 games, to win 7 games, to go to a bowl, whatever the goal of that team is, they want to know who the next star is going to be. So, we don't always provide that information. I mean, there's guys that are 2 stars that are superstars in the NFL, and we just had no idea they were going to be as good as they turned out to be. But sometimes we get it right, and, the fans really enjoy following along the process.
How has your job changed the most, I guess, from, say, 2005 to now?
Well, it used to be VHS tapes, in the mail. My mailman hated me because I used to call around to high school coaches and ask them to send me VHS tapes through the mail. And then it became DVDs, which were a little bit lighter. But now all the film's online, which is great. You don't have to constantly nudge coaches to put something in the mail for you. You can just go online and pretty much see any kid you want. The camp business has expanded quite a bit. Back in the mid 2000s, it was just pretty much Nike that was doing camps. Now you've got all the brands, including Adidas, which is the sponsor of our camps. You've got many, many more 7-on-7 opportunities to see kids. The process itself has taken off to the point where it was a lot more genuine in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. Kids would tell you the truth. And it was easier to report on because they would tell you the truth. Now there's a lot of head faking. There's a lot of, I've got a top 8 when the kid's got a top 2. Things like that, because they all want the attention. And of course, Twitter and social media has changed everything. We're no longer really breaking the news. We're responding to the news, whereas in the early to mid 2000s, we were breaking it.
Is that frustrating?
You get used to it. At first, it was very frustrating. I remember the first commitment that I got scooped on by Twitter, and it was, I got scooped by the kid himself. And how the fan bases are, everybody thinks you hate their team, and, if you do your job right, everybody thinks they hate your team. So, it's I won't name the particular fan base, but, I went on that message board to talk about the commitment, and people were going nuts saying, that I got scooped and I suck and all this other stuff. And I was really upset because the kid did it on Facebook, not Twitter, because Facebook came around first. And I'm like, that can't happen again. So then I started working even harder to secure commitments, but then it just became a trend where the kids were, putting out their own information. There was no way to stop it. So it was frustrating at first, but now it's just part of what we do. It's, just every commitment's going to be announced either on, television for the big name guys that decide to wait till the end, or, on Twitter for the guys who want to get it over with early.
And what year was this, that first one?
Oh, gosh. That was probably right around 2010. It was right around the Clowney. 2011 was Clowney as our number 1 player. 2010, I think, was Ronald Powell. Might have even been 2009, like Terrell Pryor, range. So it was right around that range there where, kids were putting their commitments up on Facebook and stuff like that. Because I remember we used to be, camped out at schools. I remember the whole Terrell Pryor non-commitment on signing day was a big deal back then. He he had sort of decided that he was going to make his decision on signing day, and then everybody showed up, all the media showed up at Jeanette High School, and he said he wasn't going to make his decision at that point in time because he and his father hadn't agreed on a school, and that was a big deal back then. And now if something like that happens, it's like, well, yeah, of course. Kids commit 4 or 5 different times now, but that was the sort of the beginning of this craziness of decommitments and, changing your mind every 2 seconds.
You said that if you're doing your job right, then a lot of the fans hate you. You specifically mean just because you're telling the truth as you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it's hard to do because, okay, let's take Clemson and South Carolina. If I say anything good about South Carolina, Clemson fans hate me. South Carolina fans don't acknowledge it whatsoever. If I say something good about Clemson, South Carolina fans hate me. Clemson fans don't acknowledge it whatsoever. If I say something bad about Clemson or South Carolina, and if you've been doing this for 22 years, you've said bad things about both of those programs as they've struggled, then you hate their team forever, and they never ever forget. The running joke on the Clemson board is Ricky Sapp to Florida State, which the story behind that actually was I was down at the Army All-American Bowl, and Ricky Sapp was on the phone talking to the coaches at Florida State, and he was setting up an official visit, and he was going to take an official visit to Florida State. I wrote in a recruiting notebook that he was going to take a visit to Florida State, and that if he did, there was a good chance that they were going to steal him away from Clemson. At that time, Florida State had a little bit more juice than Clemson did in recruiting, and Bobby Bowden was well known for sort of closing on guys late down the stretch. The Clemson staff read that article, got to Ricky, stopped the official visit, kept him in the fold. So people think I predicted Ricky Sapp to go to Florida State. It's not true. I never did. I reported that he was going to take an official visit there, and if he did, then it might be trouble. But all these years later, it's Ricky Sapp to Florida State. So there's truth behind everything, just not a lot of it.
And that was, 13 years ago?
Geez, Ricky was 2003, 2004, something like that?
Oh, I thought it was like 6 or 7. Or
I don't remember. Ricky Sapp was so long ago to me. It seems like, let me see. Ricky Sapp was, see if he pulls up. Of course he doesn't pull up. How can he not pull up? Mid 2000s. So let's go with mid 2000s.
06, somewhere around there, I think.
Yeah.
So you, and I admire it, the willingness to wade into discussions on the individual rivals' team sites and message boards and to participate. What is that like? Because you have your plenty of people who are who talk smack or condescending or whatever. What's that process been like for you as you've done it, not just at TI but everywhere?
It's not fun. You just have to embrace it and go with the flow. In the early portion of my career, when Rivals first launched message boards and things were a little bit more civil on the internet, I would really take it to heart if somebody said something negative, and it would affect me greatly. And this was way early in my career. And then it just became, very commonplace. And I started noticing these guys, the fans really, they're thinking things that aren't occurring, in reality. Ricky Sapp to Florida State. They're seeing and hearing things from other people who got it wrong and sort of regurgitating it. And with that reputation, the bigger you get in this industry, the more of a reputation you're going to have, and the more, obviously fans, I'm doing air quotes, calling them fans, you have, are going to come after you. And, on some boards, it's civil to start with, On other boards, it's relentlessly evil immediately. It really just depends on the fan base, but it's always interesting to me, the evolution of the thought process. At first I thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. These people hate me. But I realized, they don't hate me. They just don't like any opinion that's negative towards their football team or positive towards their rival. And rival is actually plural. You say something good about Alabama, you're saying something bad about Clemson now. That's just kind of that rivalry has developed there. It's not just South Carolina anymore. So, it's interesting, but it's frustrating too, because, you go on there with an opinion, whether it's going to be popular or not, it always turns into a negative. Message boards, fans on message boards, generally the ones that don't comment are the ones that are the more reasonable.
Right. And
the ones that do are the real rabid fans that take everything the wrong way. So, I'd say it's interesting. It's funny, Clemson fans hate me as much as, I don't know, Oklahoma fans or Texas fans or Michigan fans or Ohio State fans or whatever. And, I predicted their first national championship. You would think they'd be like, oh, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. Because I was the only one, I think, in the nation when Deshaun led them to the national championship at the beginning of the season who picked them to win it all. And they ended up winning it all because nobody thought anybody could beat Alabama. And it's still the best prediction I've ever made, as far as a football team in my career. But they quickly forget, even national championship fan bases are just angry. I can't understand it.
So just to be clear, you said some message boards are cordial to begin with, some are just immediately hostile. You're saying that Clemson is on the latter part of that spectrum?
No. Actually, Clemson's one of the better ones.
Okay.
You wouldn't think it if you just, a fan looking at the responses I get on there. You'd think, oh my God, they hate this guy. Who is this person? He's the worst person. There's been polls put up. Who's worse, me or Hitler? Stuff like that on message boards. You would think that the Clemson fan base hates me more than any. They're not even close to the most venomous fan base at all. I actually enjoy going on there, and I respect, Chris Hart obviously runs a great site, welcoming me there. There are some sites that don't want me to post on their message boards anymore.
Oh, wow.
Or there are some sites that will lock any thread that I'm in, which is crazy to me because, again, I don't care what the fans are saying to me, about me, whatever. They're venting. They're getting it out there. I may say something nice. I may say something not so nice. But everybody has a right to their opinion, and a response to that opinion is welcome. But yeah, it's gotten to the point where there are some message boards where it's impossible to even break news or anything. It's just, I don't know. I think it's going to get worse. Twitter is worse than the message boards, though. The difference is in Twitter, if you say something pro-Michigan, you'll have the pro-Michigan fans fighting with the Ohio State fans who come in and call you a hack. On the message board, there's nobody there. So if you go on the Clemson board and say something bad about Clemson, everybody on that board, thousands and thousands of people, are Clemson diehard fans. It's like I'm one person with a football and I'm playing a team of 11 and everybody's tackling me, but on Twitter, at least, there's more of a balance. But the reason we're successful as an industry and the reason we're successful as a company is because of the message boards and the ability of people to give their opinions and all that stuff. So I never shy away from it ever. If I'm told, like if Chris came to me and said, "Hey, listen, Mike, every time you post, it's a 5-page thread about how much people can't stand you and think that you rank our kids too low and all this other stuff. Let's stop it." Then I would, out of respect for that publisher. Chris would never do that, of course, because he knows that's what it's about. It's all about. Clemson fans secretly love it when I say good things about their program because they think I hate them. So when I tweeted the other day that Xavier Thomas could very well be the best defensive lineman at Clemson over the last many years, they love it. Oh, if Farrell said it and he hates us, then Xavier Thomas must be amazing. But the truth is, I don't hate anybody. In fact, I am no longer a fan of any college football program, conference, or anything. And that ended probably 20 years ago. You get into this industry and you lose that innocence as a fan, and you become, a personality and a journalist, and you just don't care who wins. You just don't care. You sit back and you watch the games, and they're fun to watch, but the rooting interest is gone.
But most people don't understand that. I try to explain it to people. The best analogy I can come up with is when you no longer believe in Santa Claus. You're just sort of numb, cold to it, I guess. I mean, not that you sit there watching games with a scowl on your face and you're not sitting there going, "Wow, what a play," regardless of who's making it. Not that you don't get excited about it, but I guess the belief that all these sports writers are hiding these deep-seated rooting interests is largely false.
Yeah, the good ones.
Right.
You do have your fanboys out there.
Right. Plenty of them on the Clemson beat, too.
And the internet is, ripe for that. And that's what makes the job difficult as well, because you get the fanboy sites. They may be smaller. They may be the biggest site. It depends on who, which market you're talking about. But they'll just, there's no way to compete with those guys. They're getting every 5-star. Every kid that visits is going to commit. And the fans, that want to be spoon-fed false information, but they eat it up. So, today's a terrific example. Paris Johnson Jr. just visited Tennessee and Georgia, and we did a question: can Tennessee steal away, Paris Johnson Jr. away from Ohio State? Had the same question been asked to me a couple of years ago about Jackson Carman, my answer would have been the same. No way. Not a chance. And Clemson pull that kid away. He's from Ohio. He loves Ohio State. He's there all the time. He's just tweeting out for attention, blah, 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 blah. And then Carman ends up committing to Clemson and making us look bad. But I said today, I don't think Ohio State's going to lose this kid. I know he's going to take visits. They all do. Tennessee fans are insulted, rabid, angry, because there's guys out there on other sites saying, we're going to get Paris Johnson. And they want to believe what those people are selling. So the truth is not really your friend very often in the recruiting business.
Mike, could you, if you wanted to, you obviously are paying attention to what fan reaction is, after you write your stuff. If you wanted to, could you just say, you know what, I'm going to do my job and report what I find and what I think, and I'm just going to ignore the reactions?
I don't think I could do my job as well. I think the reactions are important, even if they are delusional, if that makes any sense. The reason we're successful at Rivals, the reason our websites, our team sites, are successful is because of that rabid fan base. You know, the ones that go crazy for a year round, never missed a game in 15 years, you know, live and die with the football team. And those are the people that really take offense when you say anything bad about their program. If I weren't able to interact with those people, I don't think I'd be able to do my job as well. I do get jealous a little bit of ESPN because they don't have message boards. So those guys can just say what they want, rank who they want, and never, ever, 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 ever have to hear from anybody because they're not really interactive on Twitter either. But to me, that's not immersing yourself in the whole excitement of recruiting and following college football. I think you really have to wear it on your sleeve a little bit, like Kirk Herbstreit does. You know, he's great at what he does. He says some stupid things on Twitter every once in a while. He gets defensive. I think he had to move from Columbus. You know, his life has been shaken upside down for his job, but he loves it and he does a great job at it. And he's not afraid to share his opinion. I don't want to be Stephen A. Smith where my opinion's just stupid and I'm screaming it louder than everybody else just to get attention. I couldn't do that, but I couldn't do it the other way either, where I'm not giving my opinion at all.
The newest sponsor to the Clemson Dubcast is Harris Flooring America, based in Anderson, South Carolina. They've been family-owned and operated since 1947. The owner, Scott Junkins, big Clemson guy, employs Clemson folks. Harris Flooring offers a unique shopping experience through value in their services, developing the right product solutions for your home or business, and delivering on their promises. They serve the residential and commercial segments. They've done a lot of work for Clemson, both the athletics department and the university side. I remember last October when Dabo Sweeney came over to visit with us for the 10th anniversary series. He went over at the McFadden building, the old football coach's offices for that. He looks down at the carpet and goes, "Man, they got the same carpet that was here when I was here. This is crazy." Well, that's about to change because the McFadden building is undergoing a substantial renovation, and Harris Flooring America is responsible for replacing all the carpet and tile over there. So Dan Radakovich and his staff over there and everybody else is about to be outfitted with some really nice new digs, including the flooring. For you homeowners out there, Harris also offers floor-to-ceiling design capabilities. So give them a call, 864-642-6183, or on the internets at www.flooringamerica-anderson.com. Harris Flooring America. What is your day-to-day process like at Rivals, your staff, their roles, the amount of ground that you cover from coast to coast as you evaluate prospects?
Yeah, my role now is it's a lot more directing, you know, our regional coverage, you know, sort of letting the guys do their thing and training them if they're new or if they run into a situation that they haven't run into before. So, you know, we have our regional analysts, you know, all across the country. Many of them are very experienced and don't need me day to day to tell them what to do. You know, so for my day, it's a lot of thinking of what I can write that would be of interest to the non-subscribing user. Trying to use the Rivals front page as sort of a portal into what you can get if you're, you know, a Clemson fan or a Georgia fan or whatever. You know, and obviously a ton of film. It's just film. Because, you know, we've already ranked the 2020 class. We've gone through our third ranking of the 2020 class. 2021's coming in May, so I'm already breaking down film with those guys. You know, it's gotten to the point where we're slowing it down ourselves internally because it's gotten so fast with the competition ranking these kids so early and so fast. We're going to slow it down ourselves. It's better to be accurate than first. So the day to day there's a lot of fires to be put out as well. You know, somebody said something on this message board that upset these people, or somebody wrote this that upset this coach or this kid or whatever. There's a lot of that stuff, but it used to be, I owned a region, which was the Mid-Atlantic region, and I oversaw the country. Now, after years of pleading, and this was, I think, 6 years ago, they got me a Mid-Atlantic regional analyst, Adam Friedman. So now all the regions are covered, so I can just sort of focus on the nation and pretty much try to keep track of everything. That's the challenging part, is that I'm supposed to know everything about everything as the national guy, which is impossible. Covering a team, I started covering a team for recruiting, which I thought was challenging. Then I did a region, which I thought was very challenging. And I've done the nation since 2004 or 3, something like that, which is unbelievably challenging because you have to make sure you don't make any mistakes. You know, I put out a thing today on my 3-point stance as to which teams are known for recruiting which positions the best. And I got Clemson on there twice. I've got Clemson at wide receiver and defensive line. And this is just in recent years, based on recruiting and how they've had success with guys in the NFL. I was doing the offensive line one, and I was like, Texas A&M does a really good job. Alabama does a really good job. And I just continue to look and think. And I'm like, I know there's somebody I'm missing. And it was Notre Dame, who put Ronnie Stanley in the top 10 of the draft, put Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey. I think we're both top 10 picks, and have done an amazing job over the last few years developing offensive linemen and recruiting offensive linemen. Had I picked another team and not mentioned Notre Dame, my whole week would have been shot. The Notre Dame board would have just blown up. So it's a lot of research and making sure you're remembering things correctly, going back, looking at things correctly, and making sure that you're not missing anything, because, you know, they won't remember the hits, they'll remember the misses. And that's how it is in this industry.
What's your proudest moment in all these years of doing this, and maybe the moment you wish you could have back?
Proudest, I think, honestly, getting on ESPN. You know, I think I made certain people a lot of money. A real lot of money. And I make a good living myself, but, you know, living in Connecticut and having that meeting with Dave Revson and bringing Rivals.com to ESPN before ESPN even had a recruiting solution, you know, getting on ESPN News, getting on ESPN2, being the first recruiting analyst to ever get on Game Day, being on Sports Center with guys like Scott Van Pelt, bringing it to that level between 2003 and 2007, and almost actually helping broker a sale of Rivals to ESPN. ESPN was originally going to buy Rivals, not Yahoo, but things fell through. And that's why I'm not on ESPN anymore, because ESPN didn't buy Rivals and came up with their own recruiting solution. And now they do a great job doing what they do. But I think that's my proudest moment is taking the company, you know, from being brand new and small to, and not by myself, of course, but contributing to making the company $100 million company in 2007. I don't know what the worst thing is. I've done so many bad things. I've missed on so many guys that it's really, really difficult to pinpoint the worst thing. Gosh, there's too many, there really are. I mean, there are kids that I look back on the Rivals 100 and the Rivals 250, and I look back at some of these kids and I'm like, how on earth did this kid not make it? I think one of the best examples of that, I just clicked on the Rivals 100 in 2010. Kyle Prater was the number 3 player in the country who went to USC out of Illinois. Busted. Didn't do anything. Curtis Grant was our number 2 player in the country behind Clowney in 2011. Went to Ohio State, busted. Never made it to the NFL. These were kids that I scouted, saw in person for years, and they were just can't miss. And they missed. And I don't know how they did that. So that's kind of like the one where you just scratch your head and you just don't understand what happened. But I guess that's the case with all the 5 stars. We wouldn't have made them 5 stars if we didn't think they were going to be playing like 5 stars, but a lot of them end up not living up to that. And the frustrating part is the ones that develop in college, and you just can't go back and say, well, had you seen him in high school, you would have ranked him as a 2-star, like Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell in high school was kind of a chubby, oversized running back, linebacker that was being recruited as a fullback and was thrown a bone by Michigan State as an offer. And they were either going to put him at fullback or change him to defense. And then he got himself in shape, had a great career at Michigan State, then really, really got himself in shape at the NFL level. And now he's a superstar, and he was a 2-star for us. But I always tell people, if you saw Le'Veon Bell back in high school, you would have slapped 2 stars on him. So those are the frustrating ones.
Do you think this, epidemic of, maybe epidemic's the wrong word, but whatever, of cheating, this being exposed in college basketball, do you think there's any danger of that happening in college football, that similar stuff could be going on?
Yeah, you got to be careful that, and the NCAA has actually been pretty careful about it, because there was a time in recruiting, probably right around 2010, 2011, where 7-on-7 football was set to be the AAU of basketball recruiting. And it was set to take over everything. It was going to take all the power away from the high school coaches. It was going to take all the power away from the kids. Kids were going to be lined up with brands of apparel, and handlers were going to determine where everybody went. And that's where you get handouts, and that's where you get just rampant cheating. But the NCAA did a good job reeling that in. We still have 7-on-7s, but they stopped allowing 7-on-7 tournaments, independent 7-on-7 tournaments on college campuses. They stopped allowing college coaches to scout in person, at camps, independent camps. So they started to get into that, because I remember going to Nike camps at 7-on-7s and standing next to Urban Meyer and Charlie Weiss and Nick Saban, watching the same kids that I'm watching and evaluating them in the same way on a college campus. And I'm like, this is interesting, but where does this go from here? And I actually started to create some of my own camps in New Jersey. I started in New Jersey, but I did in North Carolina, Maryland, and all that other stuff before we even had a camp series at Rivals, because I knew that's the direction the industry was heading. And had a couple camps held on college campuses, and then they stopped allowing that, which I think was good, because it took away the power of anybody who wanted to use it in the wrong way. I was doing it for Rivals so we could get evaluations and headshots and stuff like that. Other people were starting to create camps because they wanted to get to know Coach Meyer, because they were a huge Florida fan. Stuff like that could have got out of control, and it hasn't yet. But it could. But I think the NCAA, even though everybody slams them, and I do too, I think they did a really good job making sure football didn't turn into basketball. And we're still at the point where it's not basketball.
If a college coach wants to cheat today, what's the easiest way to do it?
Oh, man, there is no easy way to do it. I think the trickiest way to do it is to sort of funnel funds through a church or a ministry. And I know that sounds just shady as all heck, but you can't go to a house anymore and give a kid a car, because that car is going to be on Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat within 10 seconds. You can't hand them a bag of money, the whole bag man thing. You can't hand them a bag of money. You can't buy them a house. You can't hire their parent, to work for you in some job that's made up. It's hilarious. I mean, people think that Tua Tagovailoa's family was moved from Hawaii to Alabama by Nick Saban. That's ridiculous. The trail that would be involved in doing that would expose Alabama to the harshest of NCAA sanctions. But there are a few loopholes here and there. And I think one of them that I've seen, not recently, but that started to become a trend, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was to funnel money through a church, and then the church would funnel that money out to the families and things like that. So there's tricky ways to do it, but I still think it comes down to everybody cheats. Just depends on what level of cheating you're talking about. People think that everybody's paying players. I think it's a huge insult to the players, to the prospects, to the kids that I've gotten to know and got to know their families. When a kid commits to a certain school, you'll see dollar signs come up on Twitter, or, oh, the bagman visited him. The latest is Georgia. Georgia's paying everybody. That's the popular one. Before that, it was Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss did end up getting caught doing some stuff, but every kid's not on the take, and every school isn't paying kids to go to their college. So I think that's one of the misconceptions. I, in 22 years of covering this, have never once caught with undeniable proof cheating where money was involved, or, goods like a car or a house. Never once did I ever have enough proof where I could go to the NCAA and say, hey, look at this. And that's 22 years. So I don't think cheating is nearly as bad as people think it is.
You're outside the bubble up in Connecticut. From your vantage point, what do you think about Dabo Swinney, the football program, particularly what they've been able to do in recruiting, not just out of state, but way out of state, way beyond their typical geographical footprint?
It's pretty amazing. They recruited well under Tommy Bowden. Obviously CJ Spiller and some of the other guys they recruited well, but the level of efficiency that they've taken on under Dabo is extremely impressive. You don't see a lot of kids committing to Clemson and then decommitting. You get your Robert and Kim DJs every once in a while, but we all knew he was going to Ole Miss for his family. His brother was, and all that stuff. But rarely do you see kids commit to Clemson and decommit. They put together classes that are properly sized. You don't see 28, 30 player classes at Clemson. Oftentimes you see under 25 kids in a class. They miss on very few of their evaluations, which is also extremely impressive. So all that chaos that you see that comes with Alabama Ohio State, Georgia, some of the other programs out there that get kids and flip kids and lose kids to flips. Jake Fromm's going to Alabama, then he's going to Georgia, or Urban Meyer, back when Urban Meyer was in charge, was flipping kids at the last moment. Dwayne Haskins, who, could be the first quarterback taken in the draft, stole them right away from Maryland at the end of the process. You don't see Clemson doing a lot of that. They pick their guys, they recruit their guys, they get their guys, they hold on to their guys, and they close very well. So I would say out of efficiency in the nation, Clemson's number one in recruiting overall. They haven't won a recruiting title because, again, their numbers aren't huge. But I think that's only a matter of time as well, where they finish number one. This could be the year, 2020. I mean, they're involved with so many kids that are 5 stars right now. It's ridiculous. So from an outsider's perspective, I think the recruiting process at Clemson is really what I would model if I was another program trying to sort of build from the ground up.
How different is their approach from just about all others?
They're a very family approach, family-based approach. They don't have the big city to sell. Clemson, South Carolina is not LA. When Pete Carroll was selling the glitz and glamour of USC, it didn't have the winning tradition that Gainesville had when Urban Meyer was picking kids off left and right at Florida. It's more about the family values and how tight knit the players are on the team itself. You go to a Clemson practice and kids always tell me, I hear the family feel all the time, but I can tell when it's just a line being used and when it's really affected a kid. I think the last program, honestly, that had that type of practice or game sort of strength in the recruiting was Miami in the late 90s. Where kids would go to a visit and come back a different kid. Mm. Now, it turns out at Miami, they were going on visits and coming back a different kid because they were going on yachts. There were bikini parties and all this other stuff. And
Nevin Shapiro.
And stuff we didn't know was going on. But I remember kids going down there, and I said, there's no way on earth he's ever going to go to Miami. He's not a Miami kid. And then they'd come back, and I'd start talking to him, and he'd be all Miami. I'd talk to kids who go to Clemson, and all of a sudden they got a Southern accent. And I'm like, you're from California, So I think that's really what they do a good job of, is selling the family aspect of things, and it really works.
When will you have the next update of the Rivals 250 and Rivals 100?
250 for 2020 is going to be the 100 and the 250 for 2020. We're going to be doing that in May. We'll be doing our first 100 for the 2021 class in May as well. And that brings us into the 5-Star Challenge, the opening, all the summer events. So we'll be able to re-rank in August for both of those classes and head into the season. So we've got another couple months here of evaluations with the spring camp, 7-on-7s, multiple film evaluations too. That's something people don't understand, is like, how in the NFL this year, first of all, if you ever want to be a scout, watch the NFL Combine from start to finish. Watch it and listen to those guys. Listen to Mike Mayock. Listen to Daniel Jeremiah. I learned something new every year watching that religiously when it comes to evaluating talent. This year, they say the Combine itself was so wide-ranging in opinion that more NFL teams have had to go back to the film and watch a kid again than they ever have before. Today, Will Greer had his pro day. He did so well, everybody's going back to the film to watch him again to see what they might have missed. People think we watched the film the first time and that's it. We never watched the junior film again. No, we always go back If a kid starts getting 15, 20 offers, right? We're trying to figure out what's going on. What made this kid blow up? Was it a camp? Did he just cut an 8-minute highlight film and it used to be 3 minutes? What is it? And we'll go back and review it. And 9 times out of 10, there's something new that you're going to find. And that's how kids go from 3 to 4 stars and 4 to 5 stars and stuff like that without any evaluation. I mean, you can have a kid go through the entire spring, not go to one camp or 1 7-on-7. He could be a 3-star in February. He could be a 4-star in May. And people say, well, how could that be? He didn't do anything. He didn't leave the couch. Well, of course he left the couch. He was working out with his team and stuff like that. But we went back and watched the film and we saw what we missed the first time. So that's why film work is just never ending. You have to love it or else you can't do this job. So we'll be reevaluating film on all these kids as well. And that's what we're in the process of doing to try to get the rankings right as best as possible. I mean, obviously Clemson won 2 national titles over the last 4 years?
3 years.
3 years. Mm-hmm. So they should have been number 1 in recruiting probably every year since 2016. So we don't know what we're doing.
Well,
but they've always finished very, very high. It's just, they just didn't finish number 1 and they developed players really well.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, I'm far from a recruiting junkie, but is there any merit to having a weighted system in favor of like if there's a quarterback signee that you are like, man, this is a franchise guy, say Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence, could that give it even more weight, just given how important it is to having that type of quarterback to success in college football?
We thought about it. Obviously weighing the quarterback higher than other positions. I think that's the one position obviously you can weigh, and then you can debate as to what the next position would be. Some people will say the offensive line, some people will say the defensive line. But most people say the toughest evaluations are quarterbacks, offensive linemen, and then defensive linemen. I personally think it's offensive linemen first. They're the hardest. Quarterbacks are second, they're very, very difficult as well. And then it's cornerbacks, because cornerbacks never get thrown at in high school. So it's hard to evaluate film on a kid who's never targeted. We thought about that, but then, we get the quarterback position wrong as much as we get it right.
Yeah.
That it would just be unfair. Kyle Wright, people won't remember Kyle Wright unless they've been with rivals for 20 years. Can't miss kid out of California. Can't miss. Chose Miami over offers from everybody else in the world. Rhett Bomar, can't miss kid from Texas. Chose Oklahoma over offers from everybody in the world. I can go on and name can't miss quarterbacks that missed for different reasons. Kyle Wright just wasn't very good. Rhett Bomar got in trouble for having a sort of a stand-around job and had to transfer. There's just so many different aspects of failure for the quarterback position. And now, in this day and age, I would never do it in a million years because these kids transfer out after, one season. I'm not the starter. I'm out of here. See ya. So to weigh the quarterback position a little bit higher, it does get weighed. Like if we get them right, Deshaun Watson was obviously contributing a lot of points to the Clemson class. Trevor Lawrence obviously contributed a lot of points to the Clemson class. More so than anybody else in those classes because they were their highest ranked guys. But, we thought about the quarterback position and weighing it by position. We just decided it wasn't fair because it's just not a perfect system.
Yeah, and it's something that only makes sense in hindsight,
Yeah. I mean, okay, Clemson got, Georgia, look at Georgia. They got 3 5-star quarterbacks in a row. How many they got left? 1. So if we had bumped up their class because they got Jacob Eason, he's gone. Jake Fromm, okay, he stayed. Justin Fields, he's gone. Their classes would have been weighed for players that, barely had a cup of coffee there. I mean, Easton played his freshman season. Fields got in there for garbage time, but neither of those guys made a real impact on the Georgia team that was seen go to the national championship game and the SEC championship game. So it just wouldn't be fair that way. And now with the free agency in college football, the next question is going to be from everybody is, well, why can't Tate Martell count in last year's Miami class? Because he just transferred to Miami and was given a waiver. Why can't we get points for him? And I don't know where this industry's headed, but it could be headed towards something where transfers have grades as well, because it's just getting that crazy that you have to balance it all. So we'll see. But I guarantee you something in the next 5 or 6 years, if they let this happen, the transfer portal will affect team overall recruiting in some way.
Is there a time of year where what's the most time that goes by, like during a vacation or whatever, where you're totally disconnected and unplugged?
Never, ever. Never in 22 years. Never. I've been married for the same amount of time I've worked. So the reason I know that it's never, ever, ever is because I've never heard complaining stop. I mean, I've been on vacations, obviously, and say, don't bother me. I don't care if the website's burning down. Don't bother me. And then you can't tell everybody not to bother you. That's the problem. Like, kids aren't going to commit around your vacation. Kid's not going to avoid dropping his top 5 list around your vacation. Coaches, there's no way on earth for me. I remember one year I tried to put an auto text. So you texted me this morning. I had an auto text response when I was on vacation once. This was probably 6 years ago. That response said very clearly, I am on vacation from this date to this date and will not be available. I will contact you when I get back. And that text went to everybody who texted me. Every time, 100% of the time, when someone texted me and got that text back, they called. And they left a voicemail. I got a weird text from you. Call me back. And it was as clear as possible. Leave me alone. So then I have to call him. And I said, did you read the text? Well, yeah, I read the text. It said you weren't available for a week. That's when I gave up. I just said, you know what? Forget it. But it's the same as college coaches. They are never, ever, 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 ever off the clock. So anytime a coach gets $1 million salary as an assistant coach or whatever, they deserve it. These guys never, ever stop. And you can't have a bad day. You cannot have a bad day, because you pick up the phone and it's a kid calling you and he's a 4-star from Texas and you've been recruiting him for 8 months and you have one bad day and you don't give him the amount of love that he needs, you're all of a sudden out of his list and all that work's gone. So I have a much easier job than the college football coaches. They deserve all the money they get, period.
Mike Farrell, thank you for joining us, giving us your time, and also for all the hard work you do for Rivals.com.
No problem. I think I probably got 35 text messages while I was on this podcast.
I'm sorry.
No, I should have said I'm doing a podcast, but then everybody would have called and it would have interrupted the signal and all this other stuff. So, it's what I chose. It's going to change a lot too. I mean, eventually we're going to be paying players and, the transfer portal, like I said, is going to change everything. So we're just getting started now. I think it's good for our industry and our business, what's happening, but it's not good for our sanity. So you cover the team, right?
Yep.
Stick with that.
Yep.
That won't change.
That's my belief too. Yeah.
Recruiting will change. So anytime Strelo's a little bit snippy with you, just understand why.
He's never snippy.
No, he's not. He's a great guy. And Chris Hart is one of our best publishers. And for all the fans out there that think I hate Clemson, I do not hate Clemson.
I'll make that the headline.
Yeah, that would be a good one. The podcast, I don't hate Clemson. I guarantee you people would click on it and listen to it if they knew it came from me.
This will be well received, Mike, even if you don't believe it will be.
Yeah, I think it will be too. I have fun on the Clemson board, honestly. I started tagging my posts with Ricky Sapp to FSU, and everybody started realizing that I'm not some arrogant jerk who calls himself the godfather of recruiting who can't relate to anybody, and started realizing that I was a real person who makes mistakes and sometimes gets evaluations wrong and information wrong and stuff. So the Clemson board, trust me, that is one of the least of my worries around the network.
Self-deprecation goes a long way.
It does. I learned that, I think, 16 years ago. The first 6 years, I didn't know that. And, man, I was a jerk to deal with. Very difficult. But once you become self-deprecating, everything changes in life.
Well, get back to those texts, Mike. Great job. Thank you.
I got to go answer a bunch of things. All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Okay, one conclusion after that conversation. I would not want that guy's job. I mean, not just the workload, but, man, just getting hammered by fans left and right, regardless of what you say. But, hey, good news for TI subscribers. He likes the discourse on our message board, relatively speaking. So thanks to Mike for giving us his time. Thank you also to our sponsors. Title sponsor, Parham Smith & Arch Total Law Firm in downtown Greenville. Also in Greenville, Tandem Payment. Harris Flooring America in Anderson. And the Abernathy back on board with us. Looking forward to recording some future podcasts over in their fine and friendly confines. Thanks most of all to all of you for listening. We have, I believe, 102,000 downloads so far since we started in late August, so that's not too shabby. Everybody have a wonderful weekend watching basketball, doing whatever you do. We will be back next week. Stay tuned and take care.